David, there is no question that the conservative supermajority on this court seems poised to strike down this program. And White House officials have been saying that they have not discussed options. There is no plan B. David?
Terry Moran in Washington tonight. Terry, thank you. We turn now to news involving Iran and its nuclear capability. Tonight, a top Pentagon official testifying that Iran could now make enough nuclear material for a bomb in just 12 days now. Let's bring in our senior White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, live at the White House. Mary, that official describing the pace of Iran's progress as, quote, remarkable in the years after the U.S. pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal.
And David, tonight, Iran is on the brink of having enough material to build a nuclear bomb if they wanted to. A top Pentagon official today saying that they could reach that point in just 12 days. This is now the closest that Iran has been to being capable of building a nuclear bomb since former President Trump left the Iran nuclear deal back in 2018. Since then, Iran has made astounding nuclear progress, the Pentagon says. Now, the Biden administration did try to restart and revive that deal, but with no success. And David, it is important to note that while they are inching closer to this, the intelligence community tonight says they see no sign that Iran has actually decided to build a nuclear bomb. David.
But this was something to hear today. All right, Mary Bruce tonight. Mary, thank you. We turn now to the war in Ukraine and to Russia. And tonight, drones hitting deep inside Russia, one not far from Moscow. Russia saying those drones were sent by Ukraine, targeting oil and gas facilities. And Vladimir Putin ordering tighter controls at the border, acknowledging in public, quote, there have been losses on the battlefield. ABC's James Longman in Ukraine tonight.
Tonight, a series of mysterious drone strikes inside Russia, according to the Kremlin. Videos circulating online show an explosion at an oil depot, smoke billowing into the sky. Another drone believed to be targeting a gas facility striking deep inside Russia. It came within just 60 miles of Moscow. The Kremlin blaming Ukraine, but so far no claim of responsibility. Vladimir Putin today ordering his Federal Security Service, the FSB, to take over border security. And he even made a rare admission, saying there have been losses in our ranks. Many of those losses are in eastern Ukraine, in Bakhmut. Desperate for a win after more than a year of war, Moscow is sending in fighter jets, battering endless buildings with artillery and losing countless lives, all to take now ruined Bakhmut. Those determined to stay, trying to survive with the relentless sound of gunfire and explosions. Buildings burning, but no one is coming to help here. But Ukraine's spirit of survival unbroken. Today, Ukraine announcing additional units are on their way to Bakhmut. The soldiers saying, though the city is on fire, Ukraine will live.
And so let's bring in James Longman live from Kyiv tonight. And James, of course, the other development we're also watching involves Belarus. Wanted to show everyone at home the map tonight. Belarus, of course, bordering Ukraine and Russia. The president of Belarus with close ties to Vladimir Putin. Tonight, that president is in China for meetings.
Over
the past 24 hours, the enemy is raging, shelling with all they have. They don't really have success on the ground. Hence, they are making it up from the skies. They are just breaking this city into molecules.
Breaking the city into molecules, a city that used to have 70,000 people. And we have new video tonight of what the Ukrainians are up against there on those front lines. These are the men leading Putin's fight. These Russians from the brutal Wagner Group are seen patrolling the area in and around Bakhmut as they try to root out Ukrainian fighters.
We entered into the area literally 4 days ago, and now it is completely liberated.
Well, you know, here's the reality. They're there on the front lines, and they say they're liberating it, of course. U.S. intelligence has estimated that 80% of Wagner Group fighters as of late last year were dead or injured. 80%. But it seems that Russians much prefer their odds fighting with Wagner on the front lines than fighting with the former Russian military there. Here's new video that we found of Putin's own soldiers, right? So these are soldiers in the Russian military, and they are now pleading with the Wagner Group to let them get out of the military and join the private army instead. Here it is.
Unfortunately, the situation here has led to the disbanding of our regiment. We ask that we be allowed to join your ranks. There are 10 of us here who are combat ready.
10 might sound pathetic to you, but the reality of it is, when you think about what they're doing, speaking out against the military that they serve, the country they serve for, wanting to fight for Wagner, those words are damning for Putin's generals and for Putin himself. In fact, Putin today admitted to losses, which he almost never does, saying that his top secret intelligence agency, the FSB specifically, has been suffering losses because of the war. So he's not even talking about soldiers, he's talking about the FSB. He is saying that units suffering losses were directly involved in his, quote, special military operation, actively fighting terrorism, organized crime, corruption, and extremism, as he called it, talking about death in their ranks. And it comes as tonight, we have new video of the vicious back and forth around Bakhmut. Here you can see Ukrainian forces storming Russian trenches. So that's a trench there that you're looking down on. At one point, a Ukrainian fighter hurls what looks to be a grenade into that trench, and you can see the blast. Now, obviously, what follows is too graphic to show. We're not going to show you that. You can imagine it, and we can tell you, yes, the explosion left the bunker littered with bodies, human lives now extinguished. And amidst all this death, Putin's top ally, the Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, is trying to help get more military aid for Russia. He arrived in China today for a state visit on the same day that the U.S. reiterated concerns that China could up the ante big time in this war, sending lethal military aid to Putin.
We did very clearly warn China about the implications and consequences of going through with providing such support.
Well, in Washington, meanwhile, a battle is raging over U.S. lethal military aid to Ukraine, over whether specifically to give Ukraine what President Zelensky wants most right now, F-16 fighter jets. The Pentagon saying that they're too costly and it would take too much time to train the Ukrainians on them.
It's just hard for me to tell any member of Congress or the American people that the best use of that dollar spent right now is on F-16s.
It may be a fair point. Of course, they obviously could have started training them a long time ago for the potential of this, but they're saying they haven't. Fred Pleitgen is out front live in Moscow tonight. And Fred, you know, when we see those trenches along those front lines in Bakhmut where you have spent so much time, how is Russia responding?
Well, for Russia, obviously, Bakhmut is extremely important. And one of the things that the Russians are saying now is that they believe that they're very close to encircling the Ukrainian forces that are inside Bakhmut, and of course, the city of Bakhmut as well, even though the Ukrainians say that isn't the case yet. But the Russians also acknowledge that a lot of their forces are now active there. A lot of their very strong forces are active there, not just on the ground, but also a lot of their frontline aviation. Here's what we're seeing. Russian warplanes bombing Bakhmut. This video posted on state media trying to show the advances the Kremlin's forces are making. On the ground, mercenaries of the Wagner private military company are leading the assault, the Ukrainians say. These Wagner foot soldiers saying they're close to Bakhmut city limits. We're approaching Yagodnoye, he says, and Yagodnoye is the entrance into town. This district our platoon has taken without a single loss. Ukraine says the situation is tough for their troops in Bakhmut, but that they are clinging on. While Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin is recruiting even more people in an ad with a top Russian propagandist. Sign up for PMC Wagner, he says. You'll learn a man's work and will be in good shape for the upcoming World War III. While Prigozhin claims he's gearing up for World War III, he's also involved in a social media standoff with the son-in-law of Russia's defense minister Sergei Shoigu. After the son-in-law, Alexei Stolyarov, allegedly liked an anti-war blogger's comment on social media, which Stolyarov later denied doing, Prigozhin taking aim. We need to catch Stolyarov and bring him to me, he says. I will train him for 6 weeks since I am a Z redneck myself. I will help him improve by sending him to combat operations. As the fighting in Ukraine rages on, Russia's president now acknowledges that operatives for the intelligence service, the FSB, are both on the front lines and allegedly behind Ukrainian lines.
Unfortunately, there are losses in our ranks. The leadership of the FSB must do everything to provide additional support to the families of our fallen comrades.
With FSB boss Alexander Bortnikov on the stage, Putin also said Russian intelligence needs to up its game.
We need to beef up our counterintelligence in general, because Western special services have traditionally been very active in relation to Russia. And now they have put in additional personnel, technical and other resources against us. We need to respond accordingly.
And you know, Aaron, it was very interesting watching that speech by Vladimir Putin there in front of the FSB. He, of course, used to be an agent for the KGB, the predecessor organization of the FSB. And you could really see that Vladimir Putin was very comfortable speaking to the FSB operatives and the FSB leadership there as well. You could also see that the FSB is very important to what Vladimir Putin is doing in Ukraine. He kept talking about how the intelligence service was really important, especially in those newly annexed areas. He says he wants them to improve and to increase their footprint in those areas. Aaron.
All right, Fred, thank you very much. Live from Moscow tonight. And I want to go straight now to the Democratic Congressman and former Army Ranger Jason Crow, who sits on the House Foreign Affairs and Intelligence Committees. Congressman, I really appreciate your time. And I want to get straight to this current, huge request from Ukraine that has really met with a wall in the U.S., and that is the F-16 fighter jets. You've signed a bipartisan letter supporting that, calling on the Biden administration to provide those F-16s. But Biden's comment just the other day about Zelensky, quote, he doesn't need F-16s now. Why is Biden wrong?
Well, Aaron, first of all, President Biden and this administration have done a tremendous job of leading and building an international coalition to put Ukraine in the position to win. Not since World War II have we seen a mass mobilization and a logistics operation like we are leading and executing right now to help the Ukrainians fight for their freedom. But, what I learned in war is that every day is a new day. You can't take for granted the successes of the past days. This war is constantly evolving. It's constantly changing. Putin is playing a long game. He believes he can continue to send young Russian men into the teeth of the Ukrainian army to be chewed up, and he can just do that for a year, 2 years, 3 years. So yes, there is a short game that we have to play. It is true we have to send munitions, we have to send tanks, armored personnel vehicles, the things that they need right now. But at the same time, we have to send the things that they might need in the midterm and longer term. And that means we have to start the training and start putting the logistics together for the F-16s.
Okay, and so I guess, and I understand you're making a point, you got to start that now because it takes time to train, right, as they're saying. Adam Smith, your colleague on the Armed Services Committee, he said that it is not a wise use of the resources that are necessary to win the fight on the F-16s. So I guess what I'm trying to give you a chance to say is, why are they all saying that, but why do you come to a different conclusion? What are the core reasons that the United States should send those F-16s and start that process now?
Well, we fight in the United States what's called combined arms fire and maneuver warfare. And what that looks like is we synchronize all of our forces, our ground forces, our infantry, our armor, that's synchronized with what's called long-range fires, that's long-range rockets, long-range artillery, and then it's complemented by air superiority. We have an air cap that goes over all of it, that does direct strikes, that coordinates everything. We're now training the Ukrainians on that style of warfare. We have brigades that are rotating through the training fields of Europe and Germany and other places. We're trying to now modernize and change their style of warfare so they can be more effective against a larger Russian army. But they can't do that unless they have all the pieces to that puzzle. And that includes more advanced fourth-generation fighters. I've been told in my discussions with senior military leaders that we can train these pilots, these Ukrainian pilots, and get this ready in 3 to 6 months, much faster than I've been told by other folks in the administration. And the reason we know this is because we have had a 9-year partnership between the California Air National Guard and the Ukrainian Air Force. For 9 years, they've been flying and training with the Ukrainians, over 1,000 training engagements in that time. And they're telling us the Ukrainians know these systems, they know how to train, they are capable of getting this done.
So the other pushback, and obviously you're saying 3 to 6 months, and the administration is saying a year. So you're right, it's a very different time frame that you're talking about. But one of the reasons that they have held back on the F-16s, and before that held back on the tanks, right, and before that, right, so this has been a step process, has been this fear of escalation into World War III. Right, you heard Prigozhin just refer to it. Putin has made plenty of threats about World War III if the West helps Ukraine attack inside Russia, which, of course, F-16s could possibly do, and certainly by his definition would do in Crimea. So what do you say to that? Do you buy into this World War III business, or is it just bluster?
Well, I don't think there's going to be a World War III, but I am concerned about spillover. And President Biden and this administration have actually done a really great job of containing this conflict, making sure we're supporting the Ukrainians, but the United States and NATO are not fighting. Our troops are not involved, and that is the right answer. But listen, you talk about escalation. What I'm concerned about is the escalation of failure. If Russia wins this and conquers Ukraine,